quick rip because anytime you have Charles Adler in the network, anytime you have one of Canada's greatest broadcasters, one of Canada's greatest, and anytime you have the start of what appears to be a political revolution, or at least us coming to our senses, there's only one guy to talk to. Please welcome to the show. Back yet again, my friend and yours, Mr. Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen. Charles Adler, good morning. How are you this fine day?
I've silenced my phone, and that's a mark of deep respect for Dean Blundell.
No. Well, you're also doing a podcast. That's probably why you silenced your phone. But I'm really glad that you answered.
Phone, one of the things that it's never stopped annoying me. Broadcasting, podcasting, schmodcasting, it doesn't matter. When I'm hearing a ringing and I'm thinking, why can't the producer or the host figure out how to silence their cell phone? Like, how difficult is this?
I don't think we want to. I think we're those people now that like can't miss anything. Like it just might be $1 million every time your phone goes ding, 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 ding. Yeah. You know, or it just might be a new opportunity or a new life waiting for you every time. It's like ding, 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 ding.
Well, it's amazing how nothing gets our attention. Whether it's a text or the phone ringing, like nothing else gets our attention like that. You know, somebody could be, you know, their shorts could be on fire or their fry pan could be on fire. It doesn't get our attention like the damn phone. Most of the time, just a nuisance call, really.
You know, before we get to obviously this earthquake in politics in Manitoba and some of the minutia, you're in Manitoba, the new government, NDP, PC's out, landfill, humanity, all this stuff, and I want to get to it because you wrote a beautiful piece in the Free Press. Before we do that, just to finish this conversation, do you remember a time when you would say no to cell phones? Do you remember a time when you could go out and about and you'd go, okay, well, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to get out my Purley's map and I'm going to follow this map instruction. I'm going to get to that house and I'm going to turn around and I'm going to go to my next thing and I'm going to think freely. I'm not going to check my phone when I'm on my way there, and I'm not going to worry too much about who has or hasn't called me. And I'm not going to take that as an indictment because I didn't get a whole bunch of notifications on my phone today saying I was very popular. Do you remember that?
I sort of vaguely remember that, but I'm like a lot of people. I'm having a hard time remembering anything that happened before the iPhone was created. And I think the iPhone was, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Dean, because you're more in touch with religion than I am, because you used to be very religious, or at least you spent a lot of time with trained religious scholars. Was the iPhone born in a manger, and was it a virgin birth? I'm telling you that I am as dependent on my iPhone. I'm as dependent on that bloody thing as a paranoid is on horse tranquilizer. I mean, it's a serious dependency, and I know I'm not alone.
It's unreal, dude. It's like this spike of things, and like you and I talk all the time. We're texting every day. You and I talked like 4 or 5 times yesterday, but a couple of things. We'll get to those in just a second. I don't even know how we lived before this. It was like wait a second. How did we ever get to where we were going without these things?
If I go for say an hour looking for the bloody thing, I can't find it. I don't know where it is. I may have lost it. My entire life flashes before me. I become just dust. It's crazy. It is, you know, maybe the term addiction is overused, but we're hooked on them. And
I think it's hardwired us. Like I think our hardwiring's been changed over the past 10 years, right? Has to have, because all I do all day long is go, oh, what's new? Oh, what's new? Who wants to talk to me? Oh, what's new? Who can I talk to? How famous am I? How relevant am I today in my friend group? How relevant am I today online? How relevant am I?
If I don't have a phone, do I really exist? I mean,
I think more so than anybody who does.
Well, you know, Steve Jobs and those guys, you know, now the Tim Cooks, I mean, they knew what they were doing. And when I don't usually do stock tips, but I remember many years ago, some people who already had dough. It's amazing how the people with dough are the ones who are always most focused on making more of it. But some people I knew who, you know, were you know, not exactly worried about where their next meal was coming from, asked me for a stock tip if I had to recommend just one stock. And I said, look, I'm no expert on stocks, but you'd have to be crazy not to invest in Apple. because these people are going to be much bigger than government. So it's just the easiest stock call in the world. Of course, back then, Apple stock was worth about, I don't know, $30 or $40, and even I wasn't, wise enough to take my own advice, because now the 30 or $30, $40, whatever it was very, very small, compared to where it is now in the 150 range. And I guess, without doing too much here on stock advice, I guess the best advice for anyone long term on anything revolving around stocks is, why don't you invest in something that you actually are addicted to? Because addictions take a long time to get rid of, and if you're addicted to it, so are many others. So maybe Apple's a good buy.
Let's talk stock and politics, if you will. How's that for a segue? You like that one?
You must be a professional. That was
I do this for a living, you see.
Yeah, no, the little hairs on the back of my neck are growing. So well done.
Yeah, it gives us broadcasting chubby. I get it. So let's talk about the stock and politics, because I'm watching it rise and fall. It's cyclical, right? You've got a liberal movement when Trudeau came in after the Harper years, and we see the tide turn on the liberal movement because you've got this other authoritarian movement kind of taking shape in Manitoba, your home province. Stock and conservative politics in the toilet as the governing conservative government just got ousted by an NDP government led by the very first Indigenous premier of the province of Manitoba, which is heavily Indigenous. And I think it's a beautiful story to some extent. Wab Kinew, I think I'm saying his name right, is the new premier of the province of Ontario. But inside that election and the BS, if you will, leading up to it, I mean, you want to talk about the stock of a terrible way to run an election. You've been there for the whole thing. What do you make of the disaster? And then we'll get to maybe some sea change stuff in a minute.
Well, the people who ran the campaign, the Progressive Conservative campaign in Manitoba, I mean, they just come across to me as moral degenerates. I mean, that's the nicest term I can use. They decided that the best approach to reaching and seducing and making sure that the base turned out for them was to do a series of ads saying that they were standing firm on a decision not to dig up the remains of 2 murdered young Aboriginal women. And so I felt, and I had written about this long before they ran these ads, I felt that the decision to say no to the idea of possibly spending as much as $184 million to find the remains inside this massive landfill, and and some people thought of it as a wild goose chase. Experts said it could take several years, but it can be done. $184 million was the price of digging up the entire landfill. So I felt that the say no to that the premier is just saying no in a quiet press release, could actually win the hearts and minds of the majority of people in Manitoba, as long as they just left it at that. If others wanted to make it an issue, okay. But the last thing in the world that I thought would happen was, instead of just quietly releasing a press release, seeing these massive billboards everywhere, taking pride in bragging about the idea of, quote, standing firm, as they put it, standing firm against the idea of digging. So, I mean, at this point, it's just violently gross and vomit-inducing. What are you standing firm against? Are you standing firmly against dead women or dead Indigenous women? Like, what is it that you're standing firm about? And so I just thought, when they were doing this, all they were doing was risking the animus of people who are in the middle, and the so-called swing voters who had made their minds up. And I thought that rather than getting their base galvanized and energized and all those wonderful things, I thought they might actually chase some conservatives, to vote for someone else or to stay at home. And so we'll have to crunch all the numbers and do all the necessary interviews to do a correct analysis. But it would seem to me that based on the landslide that Wab Kinew's NDP achieved, some conservatives did manage to stay home, and the swing voters swung to the NDP.
What does that say to you, Charles? Like, we were talking about the inhumane politicking of the Conservative Party, and it seems to be national. In the Conservatives and the Conservative Party, whether or not you're provincial. I know we've got a Conservative Party running Saskatchewan right now, Scott Moe. incredibly conservative, and he is using the notwithstanding clause as we kind of go through the prairie provinces, notwithstanding clause to marginalize a child's right to tell their teacher about some things that are going on in their life. And there are two sides to that argument, but it's a very hard line thing to use the notwithstanding clause to kettle free speech of children and the child's rights to be able to talk. It's ridiculous. It's inhumane is what it is. And then you go over to Manitoba. Yeah, and let's not skip Alberta, by the way. Let's not skip that province and what they've been trying to do in terms of telling people they don't need to get vaccinated, hiding their status, not talking about where we're at in terms of infectious disease, because it doesn't really matter.
But all of that, Dean, all of that is old news. I mean, what Danielle Smith wants now, she wants 53%. Okay, so here's Alberta.
Yeah,
with roughly what's Alberta, about 15% of the Canadian population, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Right?
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, so it's about I could be off by a point or two, but they've got approximately 15% of the Canadian population, and they want, or at least Danielle Smith wants, 53% of the Canadian pension plan loot bag. Yes, Doug Ford is a conservative and Danielle Smith is a conservative, but can you imagine if this actually became some sort of reality where Danielle Smith was getting close to taking Ontario's money, which is how Doug Ford would see it, a civil war amongst conservatives. So there's all sorts of loony stuff going on among conservatives. But the aphrodisiac of conservatism today is anger. They just thrive on anger. They also thrive on being disgusting. I mean, nobody's more disgusting than Donald Trump. I get it. And none of these Canadian stories are, in general, more disgusting than the stuff that Donald Trump talks about. I mean, how many Canadian conservatives talk about making sure that disabled veterans don't get to attend parades for veterans? How many Canadian conservatives call people who have sacrificed for our country, a bunch of losers, blah, 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 blah. But, to just sort of stay in Canada for a moment, Canadian conservatives appear to be thriving on anger and in some cases hatred. And certainly they love to have their scapegoats. Their scapegoats during COVID was anybody who wanted a vaccine, which sounded crazy to me. You know why I wanted a vaccine? Because I wanted to live. I mean, excuse me, I'm not part of a death cult. And today, some of these same conservatives want to pick on kids who are confused and uncomfortable and in some cases suicidal because they feel that they're in the wrong body. I can't even imagine how painful that must be when you're a man and you think you're supposed to be a woman or a woman and you're supposed to be a man. And I'm probably describing all this a little too callously for some people. But what's even more painful than thinking that you're in the wrong body is the idea of discussing this with very conservative parents of yours. And so, you've got this possible mentor in your life that you can trust, a teacher. What's a teacher supposed to do? Just shut their ears, just not listen? And what's the government of Saskatchewan?
But that's what they're trying to legislate. That's what conservative government specifically in Saskatchewan is legislating.
So if I'm a teacher in Saskatchewan, am I supposed to feel paranoid about the idea of allowing a student to talk to me about this? Am I supposed
you would be?
Am I supposed to feel like I'm a lawbreaker? Oh, excuse me, I'm an outlaw. I listened to the heart of one of my students. I guess that makes me a criminal. It's crazy.
Well, but it speaks to the inhumanity of politics on the right at the moment. It doesn't matter where it comes from. Obviously, the bleed through MAGA Nation and all the maggots, I like to call them. And I had a conversation with someone who has friends in Alberta yesterday, and like, big Donald Trump fans. And I'm like, are you fucking serious? Like, you're still friends with those people? Like, you value anything they have to say when they're fans of inhumanity and people that literally purvey inhumanity, meanness, nastiness, evil stuff. Like, going back to Manitoba, let's do Saskatchewan. We did Alberta. Let's go back to Manitoba. Running on a campaign, and let's just bring this up, taking out billboards to stand firm against looking for the bodies of two murdered Indigenous women put in a landfill site because that's going to do it for their base. That to me And then the subsequent inhumanity of the statement that Heather Stephenson said, I think that's how you say her name, who's the then premier, outgoing, lost in a boat race to Wabcanoe yesterday in the NDP party, which is a big swing conservative to NDP, if anybody understands how politics in this country works. But what amazed me about that whole thing, and it still does, is that after they put that ad out saying you can vote for us, the party that doesn't want to find these Indigenous women who were murdered and dumped in a landfill site, you can vote for us based on that. And here's the rub, everybody. This is what she said. And this is what the Conservatives kind of, from my understanding, from everything I surveilled during this weirdo election, it was like, and you can vote for us and no one's going to know anyway. Like, that to me was like, Are you serious?
Yeah, I didn't hear
people to vote for you in private because they're too embarrassed, and you're trying to tell them that you're a legitimate alternative.
Yeah. To be fair, I didn't hear the outgoing premier saying it, but the commercials were loud and clear, both on social media, in print, and conventional media. Their message was that even though some people in your life may try to make you feel ashamed of supporting us, it's just between you and me. It's just between you and us. It's a secret ballot. Nobody has to know what you're thinking or how you're voting. And that too it's a little culty, and it doesn't really work. And last night the premier actually was in fine fettle. I guess part of her is thrilled to be the outgoing premier. She appears not to have been enjoying the job very much. And during the campaign, I mean, part of the strategy was to hide her as much as possible. Winnipeg is where 2/3 of the votes are. And for the last week or so, she hasn't been seen in Winnipeg. There are more Elvis sightings than Heather Stephenson sightings in the city of Winnipeg. So last night when she was conceding, I had publicly, in the last couple of years, I had never seen her so happy. She was happy. She was joyous. She was positive. In fact, I said to myself, my God, if she had governed this way for the last year or so, and certainly campaigned this way for the last month or so, she probably would have won. Or at least if she had lost, it wouldn't have been the landslide that it was.
So, Charles, is this a sea change moment? Are we seeing with the fall of conservatism in Manitoba, or the conservative government in Manitoba, and the choice to move completely to the other side, advocating for healthcare, humanity, social services, the things that governments are supposed to be doing, right? Are we seeing a crack? Because, we're starting to see real pushback against inhumanity in politics. And Manitoba, to me, was one of those provinces where you're like, yeah, it's going to be one of those provinces where you're going to see sort of the beginning of the end of not conservatism, but this brand of authoritarian, rage baiting, rage farming, inhumane politicking.
There's good news here. And the good news is that even the small C, I mean, obviously the people who are pro-NDP and some others, on the so-called progressive left, were never going to go for any aspect of this campaign. But many small C conservatives checked out. This was too much. This was too ugly. This was too inhumane for many small C conservatives. Winnipeg is a terrific test market. If you can make it in Winnipeg, you can make it anywhere in Canada. It's a very middle of the road place, very moderate place. It's a place that's allergic to extremes. It's very much like certain parts of Ontario and certain parts of what we used to call, Toronto, the good, the way Toronto used to be before all the hatred-infested aspects of Toronto life. So it is good news, I think, that many conservatives in Manitoba are saying enough is enough. And I'm hoping, I've got my fingers crossed, that nationally conservatives will say enough is enough to some of the crazy stuff that's coming out of the Conservative Party nationally. What's funny to me, and maybe I shouldn't call it funny, but it is odd that so much of the social media response, so much of the social media, like Twitter, positive response to so much of the conservative dog whistling is fake. Yeah. I mean, a third of Poilievre's own followers are fake. We know that the bots, because it's something that you've covered on Crier Media over and over again. We know that the bot farms where they purchase these bots, that so many of what's in Twitter on those replies aren't even real. So it just seems to me that conservatives in some cases are enjoying the applause of people who do not even exist.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, and you know what, that, Charles, you touched on something that never gets repeated in mainstream media, which it should. 70 to 85% of political commentary come from accounts that are run by robots or computers or troll farms in other countries. And that isn't just in Canada, that's around the world. And that is supported through, as you know, lobby groups, dark organizations. We call them dark organizations, or, you know, organizations that parade around as news outlets, the Canada Prouds, the Rebel Newses of the world. I mean, we see it on a daily basis here analytically, and we put out several articles with legitimate like analytics that dictate. And it's not, and here's the thing, it's not just liberalism and conservatism, it's 80%, 70 to 80% of all online activity, specifically on social media, specifically on Twitter, is not real. They are algorithmically gamed. They are computers and software programs that find keywords, and then and these are programs that are owned, shared, and contracted out by political parties and their lobby groups and their digital agencies like AIQ, like Canada Proud. And so you and I have the ability to kind of see through that. And it's funny because you see so much support for inhumanity, whether it's, you know, calling masks face diapers, or calling vaccines the jab, or, you know, saying it's a good idea not to look in landfill for these two beautiful souls who were murdered. You can't find, and we're going to campaign on that. Or, you know, Justin Trudeau is a Nazi, and the pictures of him with the Hitler mustache, almost all of those things aren't just disingenuous. They're disingenuous because they're not real, Chuck.
Well, you know, people ask me all the time, Dean, like, how do you handle all these people on Twitter hating you? And I say to them, it's not real hate.
It's how.
And they're not real people. So no, I don't have any trouble sleeping at night. And if some you know, conservative organization like the Conservative Party of Canada, if they want to waste their time buying people to you know, aim fake hate at me. I mean, if that's what they want to do with their time, I mean,
just so your boots, guys. I bought a bot farm, and I've been targeting you recently as well.
Thank you. Thanks for the love.
Well, engagement's, Chuck. Like, I don't care about engagement. I just want any engagement. But yes, it's 100% right. And you know, not a lot of people look through, you know, the perception, and that's kind of like the funny part. You know, you brought up a good point. If we're talking about fake BS or fake support, we just saw a real life result. That wasn't fake, right? I mean, you know, you can pretend to be, you know, the party of the people. You can pretend to have, you know, the backs of people, and you can pretend to be a good person while saying you're not going to dig up two dead women who deserve closure and their families deserve closure, and use that. But when the rubber meets the road and someone's like, okay, real lifetime, I have to go down to the precinct and I got to vote. I mean, are we not going to see real life play out? Like when we talk about the Calgary Center guy, the PC guy that lost his by-election, when we talk about different results that conservatives have gotten over the past little bit. And I mean, hey, again, real life is real life, right, Chuck?
Well, you know, I mean, real life, the NDP does not represent 70% of the people of Manitoba. The idea that they do is absurd. But they are representing about 70% of the people in the new Manitoba legislature. And there's the only way that the NDP can have 70% of the people sitting in the Manitoba legislature is for the PCs to screw up really, really badly. And this is, I think, a warning to PCs nationally. You can be as complacent as you like, and you can convince yourself that, you know, the whole country is absolutely in hate with Justin Trudeau, but so much of the hate is fake. So many of the people aren't real, and complacency is not really a great strategy. But most important, I think the message is, if you think the Canadian people, if you think the majority of Canadians are a bunch of haters looking for scapegoats every day, the way troll farmers are, you're wrong. You're dead wrong. This is still Canada, and Canada is not a nation of haters.
And with that quick rip through politics and some earth-shaking changes in Manitoba, that is where we will wrap up. I highly encourage everybody to go and download, subscribe to Charles's podcast, Charles Adler podcast. I think he interviewed Mr. Dwayne Bratt, one of my favorite followers on Twitter today. Is that not correct?
Yeah, I interviewed Dwayne Bratt because he really understands the mind of politicians, especially right of center politicians. He wrote a book, Blue Storm, The Rise and Fall of Jason Kenney. And I'm not just plugging the book shamelessly, because some of the book is about what Jason Kenney did on my show, where he melted down like an ice cream cone in July. Dwayne Bratt's a great communicator, great writer. By the way, he is from the part of the world that you're in. He was raised in Toronto, and just like you, Dean, he was a Maple Leafs fan and still is a Maple Leafs fan, and still holds out hope that someday the team will be redeemed and may get back to where they were when they were wearing the skates
70 years ago.
The Chief, one of my favorite all-time. I loved the Chief. I loved Captain George Armstrong, even though I was raised in Montreal to hate the Maple Leafs. It was impossible for me not to respect Johnny Bauer, Punch Imlach, and the Chief, George Armstrong. 1967, might as well be 1867. But you never know. And by the way, Dean, I mean, as you know, I'm a huge baseball fan.
Yeah.
And these days, people are treating the Jays just like they're treating the Leafs. They're saying, they've got a chance. Maybe this time. No. 3 out of the last 4 years, 3 out of the last 4 seasons, the Jays have ended up in the wild card slot. And they have been kicked the hell out by their opponents. Last night, they got kicked by Minnesota. I'm hoping that in the next game, they kick back. But I'm not optimistic.
Did you watch the game last night? And it's funny, you're right. It is the same vibe. It's like, hey, we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment. Hey, I guess we're not going to really hope against hope that we're going to get anything good out of this. It's like people are going to these games, watching these games. Like I walked by a bar last night on my way to dinner with my girlfriend, and we were kind of standing there, and I'm like, yeah, I think they're watching the game. They're down 3-1, and she's like, do you want to go in there and watch the game? And I'm like, absolutely not. That's just disappointing waiting to happen for me.
But at least with the Jays, you don't have to go back to 1767. I know it's 1967, but just having fun with it. You don't have to go back more than half a century with the Jays. The great Tom Cheek, one of the greatest broadcasters ever, voiced the Jays. Touch 'em all, Joe. Touch 'em all, Joe. World Series, not once, but twice. So it's fair to say the Jays do have a great heritage. But as we like to say at the pub, it's been a while between sips.
Yeah. It's a nice way to put it. And you know what? If you're a Winnipeg Jets fan, which I know you are, it's been forever between sips. And that gets started soon, too.
No, so not easy being a Winnipeg Jets fan. No,
what's that?
Not easy being – this is the great, Canadian way. It's not easy being a Leafs fan. It's not easy being a Jets fan. I can't believe I'm saying this, but these days it's not even easy being a Montreal Canadiens fan. I mean, they were in the basement for much of last year. We love hockey. It's the national game and all of that. But it's not easy being a fan when Canadians are shut out, not just for a few years, but for decades. I mean, we don't want to go too deep into this rabbit hole, but I still have a hard time understanding why no team based in Canada, where it is our national game, some say our national religion, we can't seem to bring the cup back to Canada.
You know what's amazing? I bet you, this is just off the top of my head, relating it back to where we're just talking about division, anger, rage farming. I bet you if we had a Canadian team get into the Stanley Cup final, or better yet, two Canadian teams, which will never happen, Stanley Cup final, I bet you this country would heal a little faster, Chuck.
Absolutely. My mother, who was never a hockey fan, but one day, she's in the living room and there's Team Canada playing the Russians, a country that, invaded her homeland. And you bet your ass she was all over hockey as the greatest thing that ever happened, especially when Mr. Henderson put the biscuit in the basket.
Yeah. Seriously, I can watch that like over and over and over again on YouTube, and watch him get up and flail and jump around like a peewee who just scored like and it's still one of the great in Canadian history.
Why won't they put him? Why won't they put him in the Hall of Fame? That was the most important goal ever scored. What is wrong with these people?
He wasn't great in the NHL. He didn't live
And
up
he was
to
a Leaf.
his-
We should
I
mention
know,
that.
and we don't just
He
put
was a
every
Paul
Leaf in the Hall of Fame, Chuck.
Paul Henderson was a Leaf. He wasn't as good as the Chief,
Yeah.
but he put the biscuit in that basket.
Well, for
The
like
Russian basket.
he's in the Hall of Fame for like a moment, like one of the greatest moments. It's the greatest moment in Canadian history outside the golden goal in 2010 with Sid, or was it 2012?
The tape of him is in there,
Oh,
but
yeah.
he's not in there. I want him and the tape.
I think the puck is in there.
The puck is in there.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think the stick
Yeah.
might be there.
And
His jersey's there.
the jockstrap may be in there too.
Charles Adler podcast. Go and download it if you'd like to be informed, and if you would like to kind of not just be informed, but be educated as to why we are here, what is next, and if you want someone to help you read the political tea leaves. Absolutely loved your assessment. Follow him on Twitter as well, at Charles Adler on Twitter. Anywhere you get your fine podcasts. Don't forget he is available at Crier Media, crier.co. Look for his article in the Free Press today about the degeneracy of politics and what you just went through in your province. I thought it was such a brilliant read. Have a great day, brother. Great to see you.
I'm always proud to share a platform with you. Proud to be part of Crier Media, which is just an incredible series of platforms to me. Crier Media is more pumped than a porn star when it comes to podcasting.
Charles Adler, ladies and gentlemen. Have a wonderful day, everybody.